Hey guys, my name is Richmond and I welcome you back to another wonderful video from the Rich Tech World channel. In our previous tutorial on structured programming, we learned about what a variable is and also how to name them, how to declare them in our scope of programming, and also how to initialize them. In today's tutorial, we'll be talking about input statement and then also output statement. Okay, so now after declaring these variables, okay, how are we going to assign value to them from the user? That's the input statement. And also, how are we going to print out or output whatever it is in that variable, or display whatever it is in the variable. Okay, so that's the output statements we are going to talk about today. But then before we move into that tutorial, if you're a new viewer, I would like you to tap on the subscribe button and also try your best to stick to the end of this video. And if you are able to learn something new, then don't forget to leave a like. And also, if you have any question at all, you can then you can bring it up in the comment section. Okay, so let's move into the tutorial. Okay guys, so we are going to start with the input statements. Okay, so these input statements are basically the commands or the statements we use when we want the user to enter any data into any variable at all. Okay, so variables are containers that stores data. Okay, and sometimes these data or these information are something you expect the user of your program or your algorithm to enter. Okay, so this is when we use the input statements. Okay, so when we want to ask users to enter data during program execution, we use the input statements. Okay, and in structured programming or in writing pseudocodes, there are some commands we use when we want the user to input any data into a variable. Okay, some of these statements are we have one to be input, we also have read, we have accept, and then we have get. Okay, so this is how we actually go by it in terms of the syntax or the way you write your input statement. So for instance, if you have a variable called name, okay, which is going to store a string data type in terms of the name of a particular person, and you want the user to input that particular data, you just use any of the commands or the statements I made mention of, which is input, read, accept, or get. Okay, so for instance, if you are using input, you could just say input name. Okay, so that is going to assign any data that is going to come out from the user into the variable called name. Okay, which we've already declared, okay, as a string. Okay, so you can also say read name or accept name or get name. Okay, so any form of the statements or any type of the statements you want to use, you can use in structured programming. You can use any of these four statements I have here. Okay, so there is an example down here saying that to receive 10, 5, and 30 into the variables a, b, and c, we will write input a, input b, input c. Okay, so the input a is going to allow the user to input the first data, or it's going to enable or allow the compiler to receive the first data. Okay, input b is going to also receive the data and is going to store it in the b or the b variable. Okay, and then the input c is also going to do the same. Instead of using the inputs, we could have used read A, read B, read C, and it actually means the same in structured programming. So take note of that. Okay, so Okay, so let's move on. Now, in our previous tutorial where we spoke about how to declare variables, we learned that when you are declaring variables of the same data type, you could literally write them with just one command, or you could just write them on the same line. Okay, for instance, if you are declaring a, b, and c as integers, you could just write it on the same line as declare a, b, and c as integers. Okay, and that is going to declare that variables for you. And the same here, if you want to input or receive input for different types of variables, you could also write them on the same line using just one input command. Okay, so for instance, if you want to receive data for a, b, and c, instead of writing input a, input b, input c, you could just write input a, b, c. Okay, and that is going to make your code really short, and you are not going to waste much time on that. Okay, so we are actually done with the input statement. Okay, so whenever you are writing an algorithm or a pseudocode and you want your user to enter a data into a variable, you can use the input statements, the ones we've just learnt, okay, to make everything easier for you. Okay, so moving on, we are going to talk about the output statements. Okay, so right now you've been able to receive data into your variable from the user. Okay, so how do you also display data from variables to the user? Okay, so that's what the output statements are also for. Output statements allow information to be displayed on the screen. Okay, so if you have any information in any variable at all, or if it's not even in a variable and you just want to print a normal string on the screen, or you want to just display something on the screen, you use the output statement. So it shouldn't necessarily be in a variable. Okay, and moving on, you are going to understand that better. Okay, so when we want information to be displayed on the screen during program execution, we will make use of any of the following verbs with the format write, print, output, or display. So unlike the input statements where we made mention of input, read, accept, and get, with the output statements in structured programming or writing pseudocodes, you can use the verbs or the words write, print, output, display. Okay, and then you are just going to add the item you want to display attached to it. Okay, so for instance, if you want to display something in the variable called name, if you want to display the name that is in the variable called name, you just write print name, which is going to display whatever it's in the name, or you can just say output name, display name, or write name. Okay, so that is literally going to display whatever or the content in the variable called name. Okay, so in cases where you necessarily don't want to display something in the variable, but then you just want to output something to the user which is not in a variable, you could also use the same verbs write, print, output, and display, and then you just attach the word or sentence you want to display or you want to bring out to it. That's all, and it's going to output that for you. Okay, so output statements can be used for one, two, or more items separated by commas. Okay, so if you want to, let's say if you have a variable called name, you have a variable called number, and then you have a variable called age. Okay, and you want to display all these things. Okay, you want to display the content of all these variables, you could just use one output statement, maybe write. So you just say write name, number, age, separated with commas. Okay, so that is going to display the content of all these variables for you. Okay, So the output statement can be used to display different kind of items. The following are typical examples of the items. Okay, so as I said earlier on, for instance, if you don't want to display something in a variable, okay, you just want to display a sentence, or maybe you want to give a question to the user, okay, you want to ask the user for a particular input, you could use the output statement, okay, where you are going to enter, you are going to actually let the user know what to enter. Okay, so for instance, we have here write, then you have this sentence or this question, what is your name? Okay, so this is actually going to let the user know that, okay, the program needs my name, or the program is asking for a string data type or a name. Okay, and then the user is going to be able to input that particular data. Okay, you could also say write a comma b, which will display the values in the variables a and b. Okay, and also, for instance, if you have an expression or a calculation you want to display to the user, you can also do that. So the last line is also explaining that as well. Basically, this is what the output statement is used for in programming. So now, if you are programming and you want to receive an input from the user, you can do that with the input statements. Whenever you want to also output something from a variable, or just something or a sentence, okay, a word or a group of characters or whatever, you can also use the output statement for that. So one output statement can be used to display one or more items separated by comments. Okay, I think I have explained that, and this is a typical example of that as well. So today's tutorial was very short, and I've always tried my best to keep all the sessions in this structured programming course as short as possible, so that you get the understanding. Okay, so we are going to end here for today, and the next time we meet, we are going to talk about operations, mathematical or arithmetic operators, okay, in programming, okay, and how we use them in programming. So that's just for today, and I hope to see you next time in our next tutorial. If you learned anything new, don't forget to like this video, and if you have any question, do not hesitate to leave it in the comment section, and I'll get back to you as soon as possible. So thank you and stay blessed.